I think that's the key, Helen, of sending out love, is that you forget about yourself. You forget about that,
Yes.
but you're trying to help others have a better day. And even in the lowest part of grief, or in the lowest part of any depression, of the lowest part, you can apply it to many parts of life that way. When you are low, there's always someone out there that's lower than you. And if you can pull that person up, even to where you're at, even as low as you are, you can pull that person up, you're going to feel better for doing that.
An absolute pleasure to have you on the Beautiful Side of Grief podcast, Paul Zolman.
Thank you very much, Helen. Nice to be with you today.
So this, for me, is going to be a fascinating conversation because I honestly never connected the love languages with healing grief. So I'm excited to get into that with you, Paul. But before we go there, I thought we'd begin with an understanding of the background, your background, that led you to discovering this work, what you'd gone through in your own life.
Thank you very much. That's a great question. And when I say background, I actually want to go back a couple generations, because I think that things and problems in our life, or things that we could grieve about, could be passed on generationally. And I think that's the case in my situation, that I had a grandfather that in the late 1800s had been married and had 9 children. And after that 9th child, his wife suddenly passed away. I don't know if it was directly related with that or not, but he was just absolutely distraught, grieving at that time. And in his grief, he made decisions that possibly he could have made some better decisions. But he decided to sell the farm, sell all the equipment. And then when he had that auction, the people that came to the auction, he asked them, "Would you like this child? And would you like this child? And would you like this child?" Until systematically gave away all the children except for one.
Wow.
That's how profound his grief was at that time. So he moved with that one child. His name was Benjamin. Moved with Benjamin to Montana in the United States. And then he found a school teacher that had never been married, had 10 more children with that school teacher, and so of which my father was number 6. My father was born in 1922, and when he was 10 years old in 1932, his father passed away. This grandfather passed away. So now you have abandonment issues, you've got all the grieving issues, you've got horrible things that are going on. You've got it's 1932, you're in the middle of the Depression, the Great Depression around the world. And so now you've got financial problems too. My grandmother's name, the second wife here, her name was Grace. And she absolutely lived up to her name. That she was just so very kind to children. And I just remember her in a very, very kind way. But I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for her to keep that grace during those horrific times of grieving for her husband that had just passed away, as well as trying to take care of all these children. So it's grief piled on top of all these other responsibilities. My father, because of that, had to drop out of school. He only received an 8th grade education. So with that 8th grade education, he became a truck driver. And he'd drive truck, he'd be gone for the full week, and then he'd come home, and he'd come home on Friday, and he'd absolutely would not miss, but he'd date my mother every Friday night. I mean, it was a great thing that he did. I really admire him that he did that and had that consistency about it. But the venue, it wasn't very creative when it came to a venue. It was always the Maverick Bar. It was always over alcohol. And I was number 10 of 11 children. So my father toned it down. He didn't have 19 children. He only had 11. And then I toned it down even a little bit further. I only had 8 children. And then my children only have 3. So we broke the generational thing. We're breaking it down here. But as number 10 of 11 children, I'm sure my mother must have started at the oldest to tell them, "Well, how was your week? How was your week?" and they're exchanging information on this date. And by my father's becoming annoyed and becoming annoyed and becoming annoyed and becoming annoyed, and he's going to blow here in a minute just because I'm the last kid and I'm sandwiched between two sisters and all the rest are boys, Helen. So I'm supposed to be really nice to these sisters, like no other niceness. I have to be nice to the girls. And if anything I did just was a little bit of out of line, I would get it, either the belt or a severe spanking. And I remember one time getting such a severe spanking that my rear end was black and blue for more than 3 weeks. So it was so severe. And the discipline in that way was just discombobulated. Whatever I did, I couldn't remember what I did, but I remember the punishment. And I had no idea. I still, even to this day, I have no idea what I'd done to receive such treatment like that. At that time, they didn't have the Department of Family Services or those type of things set up, so you could call somebody about situations like that. It was abusive like that most of my childhood. So the only thing you could do is really move out. So I did that after my junior year of high school. I decided I can't do this anymore. It hurts my heart. And so I moved out. I moved in with my brother after my junior year of high school, and then finished my senior year kind of on the road. After 6 months after I moved in with him, he was transferred to a different state and just had different responsibilities. So such was it in my family. My brother was very kind as a father, but he would still have that same problem with anger, that he'd be annoyed, he'd flash. And we just didn't know when the flash was going to happen. He kept the annoyances in, so didn't really talk about it until it really came out and it flashed. And so that's kind of what I had. I had that residual anger left over. I had that residual anger left over for a long, long time. In fact, most of my life I had to deal with that. At one point in time, I was 35 years old, and I realized, Helen, that I had been blaming my father for all failed relationships, all the social graces, anything like that was my father's fault. And because I blamed him, I didn't have to change. I didn't have to do anything about it. And that's kind of what blame is, that if you can blame someone or something for something that's wrong with you, you don't have to make any changes at all. And when you come to realize that, oh, well, it is you and it's your responsibility, there's a grieving process there too, that you're grieving about all those things that you did that you thought was somebody else's fault, and now it's all your fault, and it's kind of piles up on you, and you just kind of go down a little bit, and you're just trying to hunch your shoulders, and it just feels very heavy on you. So that was the situation at 35. When I was a little bit later, I had one of those moments, that annoyance, and then it flashed, and I ended up slapping my child. And we were reading the scriptures first thing in the morning, as we read the Bible first thing in the morning before I went to work. And I felt so bad about that, so bad about slapping him. My son a 3-year-old son was sitting on my wife's lap, and his arms were flailing, and he knocked my wife's glasses off her head, and they just flew 20 feet or so. I mean, there's a big knock, and so I slapped him, but I felt so bad about that I called in myself, Department of Family Services, and left a message. Nobody was there that early in the morning, so I left a message on the answering machine. Well, I didn't get a call, but my wife got a call and got a visit, and they inspected, and got a call later from my wife that I could not come home just because of what I've done. And so now they're charging me with child abuse. So I pled guilty so that my children and my wife would not have to go through the court system, all the testifying, this and that, would not have to do that. I just pled guilty. And so they sentenced me to 18 months probation and a 12-month course of anger management. So I go to this course on anger management, and there's guys that were caught, not volunteered as I had, but they were caught abusing people. One guy had held his wife up with like this against a wall on her neck, until she passed out with her feet off the ground. And until she passed out, another guy had beat his girlfriend, and she was in the hospital. So these guys got caught in the act of domestic abuse. And so I tried to just keep my head down, tried to understand. They were teaching that this wheel of abuse, that there are probably 13 or 14 different ways of that abuse could happen. And as I'm looking at it, they have just a major title of each category, and then little subtitles in the category. And in each one of those categories, there was in about 6 different categories, there were some things that I'd been trained to do. As a child, I was trained to be an abuser, and I had no idea that I'd been trained to be an abuser. So I thought, if that's abuse, then what would be the opposite of that? And so that's how I got through my anger management class. I thought, if that's abuse, what would be the opposite? Just for example, take sarcasm, for example. Is that an angry thing, or is that a loving thing? And I would think it's more of an angry type of behavior. I have here this is better illustrated. If I got a stick here that I found, a walking stick, close to my house. On one side of the stick is just very nice and smooth. You can put your hand on there without any problems. The other side of the stick has little points. It's just kind of got a gnarly and got a knot or two on there. So this is the naughty side of the stick, and this is the nice side of the stick. And I'm sure Santa Claus has a stick just like that for the naughty and nice people.
So, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that background. There is so much wrapped up in that I completely understand what has led you to where you are and why you wanted to find the opposite of that. And I applaud you for handing yourself in, because you probably never expect such a harsh consequence to that. But ultimately, it's strange how it happens, how that led you to understanding that. But I just want to go back to something you mentioned right back at the beginning, and that's generational trauma. It's well documented now and researched that we do carry that in our genes, that it gets transferred, passed down from generation to generation. So I believe that we're in a generation of breaking those cycles, of making the change, of trying to make things different. Now, I read that your mom had lost 3 children under the age of 2. Now, I can't even begin to imagine what impact that must have had on her personally. But, did that also affect you growing up? Like the fact that she had lost these children, because she probably was unsupported in that grieving process as well.
Absolutely. So you can imagine her grief of losing those first 3 children, especially all under the age of 2. The first one passed away the next day after she was born. She had some abnormality with her brain, and so she passed away right away. The next one actually lived to be about 1.5 years, and then fell face first into a bird bath and drowned in the bird bath, just face down in the bird bath, and just drowned that way. And then the third one passed away, had suffocated into a pillow, had its head into a pillow. That's back when pillows were put into the cribs area, and just put its face into the pillow and just suffocated, and so passed away that way. So you can imagine that the fourth child, they're going to coddle it. They're going to be just a whole lot more diligent, and in that way. That's my big brother that I told you about. That this big brother, he felt too coddled. He felt almost smothered instead of mothered.
Suffocated, yeah.
And it was emotional suffocation that way. But that's how they were relieving their grief. When he turned 3, I bet that was a great surprise. Or even when he turned 2, that was the longest they've had a child live. And you can imagine their joy that he's living. He's going to stay with us. And it's just, and it's going to be a happy time. And then more children were born. And like I said, I'm number 10 of 11 children. I count those 3 as my siblings as well, even though I never knew them, just because
yes.
just didn't know them. But after that, the experience I had of the anger management, it actually ruined my marriage. I had done enough things within that. So even getting a divorce is a grieving process. I just had a sister-in-law that lost her husband, lost my brother last year, and she said that she thought that a divorce was worse than a death. And I said, I don't think so, because I think that at least with a death, you wish that you could see them one more time. You sometimes feel their presence around you. You feel like they're on your shoulder, an angel watching over you, and you still have really good feelings about that, and you want to see them. I didn't want to see. I've been divorced twice now. Don't want to see my ex-wives. I don't. I mean, it's just such a different feeling. But that grieving process of losing someone like that is different in death than it is with the divorce, but it's still a grieving process.
And that's what I think so many people are going through life, not understanding that there are many, many situations where they've lost something, or it could even be a career that they've never achieved, that they dreamed of all their life, and it's just never eventuated. Those are types of grief, and all of them deserve to be recognized in that grief process, because you do go through a sense of loss. It's not quite the same as losing a child or losing a loved one, but nonetheless, I think it's still right up there. Paul, you recognized that you had this anger within you. You'd gone to that anger management course, which I guess you looked at as a blessing after all of that, because that gave you insights into how to live a different life and how to live opposite to what you were seeing. So is that what led you to the love languages then, or did you have to go a while before you recognized that there was another way, a better way of living?
Helen, thank you for that question. It's a very good question. And it's what happens after that first marriage, the divorce happened, and had just gone through a period that I was doing what I call destination dating. And that destination dating is I was going to a lot of places, having to date. I'd be in one city, the person be in another city, and we'd have a destination where we'd meet and have a date. I did that for about a year and a half, spent over $10,000 just traveling and having a great time doing the destination dating. It was on the off weekends. I was primary caregiver for the children. I had all the children with me when we divorced. And so when it was her weekend to take care of the children, then I would do these destination dates. But I was looking for love in all the wrong places, and I was just tired of it. I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and was in Phoenix, and I had my older sister was 7 hours away, and she called me and said that she thought I was lonely. And I said, "Wait, what makes you think that?" And then she said, "You just look lonely." And she said, "Well," and I said, "Well, okay." And then she said, "I've got a neighbor I want to introduce to you." And so she had a little agenda there that she wanted to introduce this neighbor. I said, "You're 7 hours away. I don't want to do that. I just came off of this destination dating. I don't want to do that." And she's the older sister, and she says, "Oh, come on. And you got to do what older sisters say." So I said, "Okay, I'll contact her. I had no expectations of any kind at all. And so we started corresponding through Messenger and through some email at first, and no phone calls yet. But we started corresponding like that, and she was actually quite funny. And it was just kind of an interesting way to start a relationship. So we started developing the relationship, and then I decided I'm going to move up to where my sister's at so I can pursue this relationship. So I pursued it, and it just came to the point that we thought this would be a nice marriage, a nice situation for both of us. So I wanted Big Brother approval. So I took this woman with me up to my brother's house, 300 miles north of where I live. And first thing that happened when I walked in the house was that my sister-in-law pulls her aside and says, the only emotion that the Zolman family had growing up or learned growing up was anger. At first I said, oh, then it made me mad. I guess you nailed it. So from that experience, that's when I started reading the color code, and I started reading the 5 love languages, and I realized that I liked the principles of the 5 love languages, but I could not relate to it because of the anger background that I came from. My sister-in-law was absolutely right. So to move from one background like that to another background just is pretty scary. And so I realized that I needed to do that. I started trying to practice it, but Helen, Dr. Chapman suggests that if I guess what love language you are, and if I cater to that, then we're going to be buddies. I'm a bad guesser. I'm a really bad guesser. That wasn't working. It didn't work this far in my life. It's not working now. And then the second thing Dr. Chapman has is that, well, if you take this survey, then you can find out what your love language is. Then what? Advertise? Hello, Helen. I'm gifts. What do you have for me today? It's a little bit awkward, just really awkward. So that
I
worked for me
appreciate
either.
that.
So what I thought was that in the happy times growing up, we played games as a family. Even though there was smack talk going on, it was just kind of a aggressive type of playing games. It just brought the family together, and it still was some happy times, as happy as they could be. And I thought, well, what if I can make this a game? So I contacted Dr. Chapman and asked if he's going to license those icons if they were doing anything like that. And his attorney wrote back and said, no, they're not doing that at that time. So I talked to a copyright attorney in my town here, and he said that theory is not copyrightable. Application is. And so with that, I was able to make my own icons and then put it on a die. And I got a die like that. So this would be the words. There's time, service, the gifts, and then touch. Those are the 5 love languages. 6 sides on the dice. So the last side has a hand with a question mark on it, and that surprised me. So there's just 2 instructions. You roll the die every day. That's the love language you send out or give away all day that day. All day.
So can I interrupt you, and can we just go back just a little bit?
Sure.
So let's explain in a little bit more depth what each of those is all about, so that somebody listening may be able to identify what they may be.
Okay. On the words, for example, you're just watching for opportunities to tell something that you like about a person, something that you love about a person. Those are the days that you're doing compliments and that sort of thing. For the days that you roll time, you're looking to put the brakes on just a little bit, spend a little bit more time with the people that you're going to be associating with on that day. Some people just like to hang out. They just like to be with you, or they like to be with someone that they care about. On the days of service, you're going to offer to wash somebody's car. You're going to do the dishes. You're going to make dinner. You're going to shine their shoes. You're going to do something for that person on that particular day. And on the gift day, that's pretty self-explanatory, but it doesn't have to be something that's purchased on that day at all. So on that day, for an example, I had a teacher, and her husband knew that she did not like gifts, but she liked the words. So on the day that he rolled gifts, he thought, what am I going to do? So he decided, I'm going to write a little note, and I'll package it up, and I'll give the note to her as a gift. She absolutely loved it. It was a gift, but it was a note was the gift, and she loved those words. On the days that you roll surprise me, that particular day you're looking for opportunities to do random acts of kindness. Just you're watching for anything. So the whole mindset here, Helen, is you're not looking in an angry culture. You're looking for what's wrong with that person, and you're going down that critical path and judgmental. You're just an angry guy. You're saying, what's wrong? I mean, just focusing on the negative most of the time as an angry person. As a loving person now, you're focused on what's right about that person. What can I love about that person? And it's just a whole mindset change. Over a 30-day period, you will have rolled all 5 love languages and have given it away so that you become very versed. You understand how to give them away. You know the languages forward and backwards. The best part about that is that it gives you eyes to see it when it comes your way. Most people only respond to their primary love language, and they consider their primary love language love. But the thing about this, it gives you that peripheral vision that says, oh, it's over here. It's not my primary love language, but I can see they're loving on me, and you can respond appropriately.
So how can somebody find out what their primary love language is if they don't already know? Because I know that you said you went through the quiz and said, now what? So there are quizzes out there that you can do, because I feel like with everything that you've just explained, when you know somebody's love language, and it's the example that you gave of that guy knowing that his wife was into words. So when it came to the gift time, he gave her a note. So when you know somebody's primary love language, that also means that is what makes them feel loved, isn't it? You know, that's when you're doing something that really puts them on a high and makes them feel really appreciated and valued. So how can somebody find out what they are?
Helen, and it's not like that anymore to find out what you are, but you'll figure it out yourself. After you learn the 5 love languages, you'll learn what it is. I mentioned that I grew up in a household of physical touch, but it was in a negative way. But physical touch, when I took the survey, because I grew up that way, and at the generational pass it on type of situation, I grew up thinking after taking the survey, that was my primary love language. But after learning the love languages, not so. That my more primary love languages would be the words. And the way you find out when you're rolling the die and you're practicing in that love language, that genre for the day, you're watching for people to light up. When they light up, bingo, you hit it. That's their love language. And you make a mental note. It's no longer do you have to put a survey, pause the relationship, put a survey in front of them, say, could you take this little survey so I know how to love you? You don't have to do that. It's really kind of awkward and it stops the momentum. All you have to do is watch. Just use your observation skills. When they light up, that's what they like. Just take that mental note and wash, rinse, repeat. Do it over and over again. And that's how you extend it. But what that does too is it gives you an awareness. If you're trying to figure out what your love language is, it gives you an awareness that, oh, they're sending love my way. You know all the 5 love languages now because you've given them away for 30 days. But when they're sending it your way, you'll figure out what lights you up. That's a more true than any survey that you can put out there. It's the reaction, the light up reaction that you send out is how you find out what you really like for your love language.
I really like this premise. I really like that you're getting to know all of them and not just focusing on one particular one, even though that may be what you are. And then, watching people light up, because that's such an easy cue.
Absolutely.
But the thing is that you're just practicing the love language in so many different ways that in itself must make you a better person all around. Yeah. But I think in also doing that, you must get your favorites that you love doing. So when the dice rolls on something like words and that's your thing, you go, oh, good. I've got words. And when it rolls on something like gifts, you might just go, here we go again. I'm not so good at this one.
Well, absolutely. That's funny that you say that about gifts, because I've got a son that when he rolls the dice and it comes to gifts, he says, I'm not doing that today. It kind of has this stiff backbone about it. I'm not doing that today. And then he'll roll the dice again, and again, it's gifts. And he says, I'm not doing that today. Roll it again, gifts. He's rolled it up to 4 times, and it's still gifts. I said, son, I think that's probably what you're supposed to be doing today. And it's just funny that it really kind of taps into, Helen, it taps into our creativity. That how can we express love in creative ways that don't cost money? And it's just love is one of those things that is really should be free. You send it out without any expectation of it coming back, and then just excuse me, then you watch for it to just watch the reaction. When you make someone's day a happier day, or you just made their day in some way or another, that they're going to go around to their circles of influence and also send that back out. They're going to be happy. They're going to have a happy day. They're going to pass that on. If you send out anger, make someone's day miserable, they're going to pass that around too. So it's just better to send out love. You don't want to make more people miserable but you don't want to make people miserable at all.
It's that whole premise of giving too, isn't it, Paul? That when you're giving, and when you're giving selflessly without expecting anything in return, that just makes you feel so good inside of you. I just absolutely love that. And in relation to grief too, I think it's a really good way of distracting you from grief. Like when you're giving to others, that's actually taking the focus off you and that's placing it on other people. And I think that, again, is such a good thing for grief. So,
Helen,
what's your, yeah.
some of the people that I've seen and observed get through grief do exactly that. They get out of themselves. It's no longer about woe is me or it's my heart that's broken, but they look at the positive side of it. And I have a brother that passed away just in March of last year, so it's been about a year and a half now. And it's this older brother that I took this woman to. In fact, I was very close to this brother, and he would pop in and visit from time to time, and I was just look forward to his visits and everything. But the way she handles it is that she feels him close by. She feels him watching over her, and it brings a great comfort for that. And it's almost like he's an angel on her shoulder now. And they had a good relationship. And she doesn't even want to date but she's obviously preparing herself. She doesn't want to be alone the rest of her life either. But she's preparing herself, and then she's visiting grandchildren and great grandchildren, and she's got grandchildren now that are getting married, and it's just to the point that she's got a large family. They had 9 children, and they're just they've got a lot of grandchildren. I think it's close to 35-ish grandchildren that are just active grandchildren. They're doing all these things, and so she's actively traveling now and actively doing things with that family. And I think that's the key, Helen, of sending out love, is that you forget about yourself. You forget about that, but you're trying to help others have a better day. And even in the lowest part of grief, or in the lowest part of any depression, of the lowest part, you can apply it to many parts of life that way. When you are low, there's always someone out there that's lower than you. And if you can pull that person up, even to where you're at, even as low as you are, you can pull that person up, you're going to feel better for doing that. It's gonna like you said, distract you from grieving about your own sorrows and your own problems, and by lifting them up. And I think that's really an important thing. I have this picture behind me for a reason. You know, there was a time in my life that I was a route driver, that I'd get up before dawn, leave before dawn, and get home after dark. And so all the time I'm seeing all the sunsets and all the sunrises. And it took me 6 months of doing this, Helen, before I realized that the very best sunrise and the very best sunsets all have clouds. So
yeah,
so
that's very symbolic.
So in our life, the problems in our life, if we could call them clouds, the way that we navigate through those clouds, the way that we work through those clouds, we'll be able to see the silver lining on the clouds. You can see several clouds over here that have the silver lining. You'll be able to see that at the end of your life, but you can't do it while you're in the middle of the cloud. Just need to keep working through it. And the best way to work through it, use the love language. This could be a tool for overcoming that grief by figuring a way out to send love out and actively do that. You'll get so busy that you won't even think about what's wrong with anybody, not even yourself. You'll think about what's right with those people. How can I love them? How can I send it out?
Another benefit of all of that you've just mentioned, which is gold, is that, like your sister-in-law experienced, she feels her spouse around her. She feels your brother around her. And I always believe that when you're in that state of love and you're not in that depths of despair and grief, when you're not there, you can actually feel that love so much better, that love from others, and even those that have passed over, because I feel that from my daughter every single day. I just know she's right there with me, being my biggest champion, and I always feel her love. And I know it's easy for us to be talking about this and saying this, and I'm not minimizing people that are in deep times of grief. Look, let's not minimize that because I know how dark that is and how painful that is. Yet what we're talking about here is just when you actually are practicing love, you can lift yourself up and see a different perspective,
Absolutely.
really.
Helen, there's one other thing I think that will help people
Yes.
overcome the grief is just the gratitude. I found that as I think of the beautiful times and the times that I'm so grateful that my brother was with me, that he was one that was really on the front end of rescuing me from that childhood of abuse, that circumstance of abuse. And he's the one I moved in with when I was 17. I just think of all the things that he just graced my life with his life, the times that we connected that way, and then the drop ins, and then just the kind things that he did for me throughout my life. I think of those things and I feel lifted up having just known that person, feel very, very emotional at times about having had the privilege to live in on the earth in a time that he was there for me. And I think that if we focus on those times of gratitude, that the grief is lifted, that the more we focus on the grief actually becomes lifted. No longer is it about the sadness of their being gone, but it's about the gladness of them having been there when they were there. And as we focus on that gladness, I think grief dissipates. It really does.
Well said. Well said. I agree with you. Totally agree with you there. Gratitude is the biggest thing in my life too, Paul. Every morning I just try and wake up in that sort of twilight zone. Just think of what I'm grateful for because it automatically lifts me for the day ahead. And it's such a simple thing to do, but so powerful. So I'd love for you to compare what your latest relationship looks like in comparison to maybe your earlier ones with living this state of love and grace and light and all those good things.
Thank you, Helen. That's a great question. My current wife is she does not roll the die, but she is very, very loving in her own way. But what she does is that she tries to guess. I don't roll it in front of her, so I roll the die all by myself. And whatever I'm practicing that day, she tries to guess what I'm practicing that day, and it's fun. It just makes it a game. It makes it more interesting for her because there's the randomness of what what you're going to roll that day, and just for her to watch my actions, watch what I'm doing, then she'll try to guess what I rolled that day, and it's fun. Just makes it fun for the relationship, and it's just she's the recipient of a lot of it, obviously, but she also sees me do it in other circumstances. And it's one thing I want to point out about the five love languages. Dr. Chapman said to focus on your significant others, meaning your family. But I just really didn't have that when I developed this. I was single when I developed this. So to focus on everybody was the only option that I had. And when I focused on everybody, I realized, Helen, that it became a habit, just became one of those habits that you want to keep, to watch for the good in people. And I like to say it like this. Maybe there's some people in your audience that actually do yoga. And at the end of a yoga class, the instructor is going to put their hands together like this and bow their head and say namaste. And the namaste, the meaning of namaste is very similar to what I'm trying to accomplish with this die itself, that the God in me sees the God in you, or the divine in me sees the divine in you. And when we express that divine and we express it in words, sometimes the people, they don't even recognize that they had that quality until you say it. And they're just so grateful that you're expressing that kindness, and they feel loved with those words or with that expression of kindness that you're giving them. And that's kind of what namaste is all about. It's from the Sanskrit dialect in northern India, and it's the Hindu version of it is the that there's good in every soul. In everybody's heart, there's good. And it evolved to the God in me sees the God in you in that way. And it's just really what you're trying to send out there, just all the goodness of other people. Quit the media, quit focusing on what's bad in the world, focus on what's good in the world. And there's good in everybody, focus on that. I like to compare it also to a magnifying glass. Whatever you focus on, whatever you magnify is going to get larger. If you're focusing on the faults of others, that's a boomerang that's coming right back to you. They're going to focus on your faults, your failings, your weaknesses. They're going to focus on that. Who wants that?
Absolutely.
So if you don't want that, quit sending it out. Start sending out love, and then it'll come back eventually.
Yes, and I love that concept of just focusing on everyone that you meet, because that's what I'm a great believer in. If you set yourself up to be that person, just shining the light, shining the love, sharing it, people don't even realize sometimes what it is, but they're just attracted to you. They just like being around you. That is what you're putting out. You're putting out such a good energy, and people want more of it. And we had this conversation before we went live and started recording this. And it was like, that is what we need more of in this world. We just
Absolutely.
there is so much doom and gloom out there. If you want to focus on that, it can send you spiraling down. But instead, you can choose just to focus on being this loving person and help others share that love around and just be that type of person in everyday life. And I think that will help you cope with whatever else is going on. Your thoughts on that, Paul?
Yeah, Helen, that's absolutely right. I was really surprised myself. I've been working all these years trying to get rid of that residual anger from my childhood, and I still found I'd be annoyed, and flash, and just get angry that way. And I found that I was being annoyed at what other people were doing. That's out of my wheelhouse. I can't
Yeah.
do anything about that. And when I realized that I don't have control over that, the only thing I have control over is sending love out and watching when it comes back, or sending anger out and expecting that anger is going to come right back. That's an immediate return on your investment. So what I found is that we're to a point that we really need to focus on this and tamp down a lot of the violence, a lot of the misbehaving, and just think of this, Helen, within a school system. If you had the children, I'm thinking in the primary school area, that if where the children are in the same class from the morning to the end of the afternoon, that they roll the die every day. And it takes 2 seconds to roll the die. That's a very small investment of time. Maybe 30 more seconds for the teacher to explain, class, we're watching for this type of behavior. Here's some suggestions of what to watch for today. And so the teacher just becomes a facilitator for expressing love. The class watches for those opportunities. And then at the end of the day, they record what they rolled, what opportunities they saw to love in that way, and then what they did about those opportunities. A journal like that,
Yeah.
who wouldn't have loved to have a journal like that from first grade or second grade or third grade,
Yeah.
or any time in their life? If we train the children to be responsible for their own actions at that age, that won't happen to them like it did for me. I was 35 years old before I realized that I'm responsible. When they understand that they're responsible and they have to write a little journal page at the end of the day, I'm talking the last 10 to 15 minutes of the day, the child's anxious. They know the bell's going to ring. It's a non-productive time. Take those 10 to 15 minutes and make it productive, and have the child write what opportunities did they see to love that day in that way that they rolled early in the morning, and then what did they do about those opportunities. So at the end of the school year, that child all of a sudden has a journal in first grade, a love journal, not a journal that I got like from my mother or my grandmother that told me what the weather was like 60 years ago. Who cares about what the weather was like 60 years ago? I could read that in the almanac. I don't need that. I want to know how you feel. I want to know what opportunities you had to love in your day and age. I want to know what you did about those opportunities. This would train that child about loving opportunities. And then after doing it for 5 or 6 years in their primary school setting, it'll be a habit, obviously, but they'll be mature enough, hopefully, by that time to be able to keep that going throughout the rest of their schooling. Change the world.
Such a good tool and resource you've got there. You mentioned about doing this. How long does it take us to go from feeling anger and that being our go-to to feeling and practicing love as more of a given in our day-to-day life?
Helen, it was so surprising to me that it was just the length of a time that it takes to create a habit, which some people say 21 days, some people say 28 days. So I just rounded up to 30 days. It took 30 days for me is all. Because I was so involved in watching for what's right about people, what there was to love about people, I absolutely forgot about being annoyed with anybody and anything that they
Yes.
did. I forgot about being annoyed. So I focused on that. And then, so now I don't get annoyed. If somebody cuts me off in traffic, I don't get annoyed. I say, what's right about that person? Maybe they're in a hurry. Maybe they have an emergency, something. You go to a different spot with those thoughts and you just break the synapses that were connecting those dots before. They break, they fall apart so that you don't even go there anymore. And it was just that rapid. 30 days is all it took for me. And I've been rolling the die ever since. I don't want to fall back into those ruts, so to speak, of that mind taking me to those annoyances and getting mad again. So I roll the die to see how it sets the tone, sets almost a theme for the day. Intentionally, I'm going to love all day today in this way.
So if people are wanting to access the die and the journal and the book that you've got out around this, they can do so by going to your website?
They can do that. For people in New Zealand, it might be easier to go to Amazon, actually. And if they'll type in, you don't want to type in Roll of Love because you're going to get love this, love that, love a million things. And it's going to be a needle in the haystack. So if you type in my name, you can actually get the book and the journal. And then if they like listening to books, the Audible is available as well. Or if they like it on their iPad or a Kindle, the Kindle is available on Amazon. You'll have to go to my website, rolloflove.com, ROLE of love.com, to be able to get the die. And the die, that's the only way to get the die. For some reason, Amazon really has a problem. Their printing presses are in a different building and a different section of the company versus the little trinkets or the things that would be connected to that. So I have not put the die in a store on Amazon, and it's just a separate. You have to buy it separately from the website.
I understand, but there's ways and means around that. You can draw out of a jar or something. Which one you're going to do? Same thing, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you want to improvise, you can do.
Yeah. And you can improvise also. If you go on my Instagram account, I have my social media manager actually doing the roll of the die every single day. And if you just want to follow what that roll does, that electronic roll does, you can see that shortly, probably within the next 6 to 9 months, I'll have a phone app that you can just press a button and the die will roll. It'll give you 4 or 5 suggestions of what you can do that day. And it'll have a famous quote from someone about that style of love as well.
Oh, Paul, I just love what you're doing there. Such good tools and such a great premise for living day-to-day life. So I want to finish up by asking you a couple of questions that I ask everyone I interview. And the first is, what is the best thing that has happened to you today?
Best thing today?
Yes.
On this day? I think one of the best things is meeting with Helen in New Zealand. I've never talked with anybody from New Zealand that way. So I consider this just what a nice flavor of the day, what a beautiful thing that's happened, that we really can talk in terms of things that are a common ground, that we both want to express love. We want to send it out. We both want to help tamp down the grief, or not really even tamp it down, but just help to have the grief go through the grief, eliminate the grief, and turn that into great and fond memories by expressing gratitude. So I'm grateful for this podcast. This is really the best thing that's happened so far today. Thank you.
Stop stealing my next question. And I'm so grateful for your response to that. Thank you. Thank you. So my next question was or is, what are you most grateful for?
Ah, you know what? My wife tomorrow, she'll turn 60 years old, and it's just I'm grateful for her. She actually decided she wanted to go on a girls' trip, so she's gone river rafting. That's what she's wanted to do for a long time. But I told her that I had many podcasts that I needed to do, and that I probably need to stay. I realized how I'm grateful for this realization of how important girls' trips are to the women in your life, and that association of women. And back when I was younger, I thought that I probably need to hold on tight, and I found that the tighter you hold on, the more they want to get away. And I thought,
Yes.
it's better to just let them have their wings, let them fly. And I'm grateful that she takes these opportunities. It refreshes her. I can see how happy she is when she comes back off a girls' trip, and that's definitely gratifying. I'm grateful for these opportunities that her friends are really taking really good care of her in that way, that they always like their own girls' trips too. And this is like the second girls' trip this month, or well, the second within the last 30 days. It's the second girls' trip that she's done, and she's absolutely her friends, and it's all good. I mean, it's really a good thing. Also gives me time to reflect on my own life and have these quiet moments to ponder and to reflect on how can I make my life better? How can I make her life better? How can I make the lives of people around me better by expressing love?
That expression, happy wife, a happy life, came to mind as you were talking about that. But it's exactly as you say, though, giving each other space actually pulls you tighter together.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you allow each person to reflect and be doing the things that they most want to be doing, and it doesn't always have to be together, then everybody grows from that. So, yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
And your go-to when you're having moments in your day that are not perhaps going so well, and we have a term here, when those moments turn to custard, what is your go-to?
So say that again. What's my go-to moments?
When you have moments in your day that are not going so well, how do you pivot out of those?
My go-to thing is humor, and I try to find the funny part of the situation, especially in the stressful moments. And I think that really helps the day get by a lot faster. That if you can find something funny to say or to think about the situation and say that in a moment, it stops everybody in their tracks, and it makes, sometimes they'll laugh, sometimes they won't laugh. Or if you can just try to find a light moment in the heavy situation, just because it really will lift you up a little bit. I had I was going to tell a story about a humor story, but anyway, that just something that just has worked for me is just try to have a humorous moment or humorous something good to say about it in a humorous way. When I showed the stick and the naughty and nice stick, that humor is on both ends of the stick. There's humor on the angry end of the stick with the words and the vocabulary and everything, but there's kind humor on the nice end of the stick, loving humor. And it really it's something that really needs to be nurtured, something that needs to be developed. And it's just a kindness that is not stinging humor like the sarcasm might be. It's nothing like that. So find a piece of kind humor in a tense situation. It'll dissipate. The story I was going to tell you is that in the United States, we have what's called the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, and they're the tax collecting place. But in addition to that, we've got the Sales Tax Commission. So there's sales tax in the United States. And one day I received a letter in the mail from the Sales Tax Commission for my state and said I owed $2,500. And I thought, I don't know that. I don't know why would I owe $2,500. When I called them up, you can imagine the other side of the phone that most of these people are getting angry people calling them because
Yes.
they're angry about a bill. And she said what her name was. And I said, could you spell that? She says Katya. And she was pronouncing it Katya. And all I said
Yeah.
was, I said, you have the perfect name for the perfect thing that you do. Katya, get in, Katya, trying to get out of those taxes. Katya. No, no one had ever mentioned that or talked to her about her name like that. She said, hello, this is Katya. And it's just hilarious. And she bust up laughing because of that, the hysteria of just, she never thought of her name as Katya. So she just asked me what I needed. She did what I needed. She zeroed it out. She closed the corporation because it was a closed corporation anyway, zeroed out the 2,500 tax bill. And I'm just telling you that humor and kindness in a tight situation like that will get you a lot farther down the road than being tense and just turning angry. That was a
Oh, yes, it does indeed. And even if you need to step away for a bit, but to get rid of that initial response from opening the letter and seeing that amount or seeing that email with that amount and then going back later so that you can be that kind person at the other end of the phone, because kindness will always get you far further than
absolutely,
anything else, won't it? Yeah.
absolutely.
So, Paul, I'm going to have all the links that you've mentioned and plus a few more so that anybody listening can go and find out a bit more about you and access those products that you've mentioned, those really fabulous tools, and they can purchase those along with your book and all the audio. I just want to say, Paul, that this has just been such a wonderful conversation for me. I love the role of love in our lives. And I resonated with everything that you were talking about. And I especially like that you've come from a place of generational trauma and belief systems where you have been that angry person so that people believe that they can make that transition from that to being a kind, loving person that other people want to be around. So thank you very, very much for sharing that with us and the wealth of information you have on this topic.
Helen, you're so graceful and so gracious. Thank you so much. It's been a delight to be on your show.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for listening. I hope you got some real value from this episode. Let me know how I'm doing or if there's a topic you'd like covered by clicking on the Healing to Be You Gmail link or going to the Healing to Be You website. To get notified of new episodes, hit the subscribe button and please share if you know of someone who could benefit from this episode. Until next time, be kind to you and take good care.